In the quiet suburbs of Dallas, Texas, a man's life shattered when a paternity test revealed the unthinkable. The daughter he raised for 15 years wasn't his. This isn't just a story of betrayal, it's a deep dive into the millions of dollars in child support paid in good faith, the emotional devastation of discovering your deepest family bonds are built on a lie, and the legal labyrinth fathers face when seeking truth and restitution. We'll uncover the hidden realities of paternity fraud in America, where the silence of a mother's deception can cost a man his fortune and his identity. The late afternoon sun, a familiar Dallas warmth, filtered through the kitchen window, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and distort the reality David Petrov had always known. For 20 years, this room had been the heart of his home, filled with the aroma of Elena's cooking and the bright chatter of their daughter, Anya. But lately, a quiet unease had settled over him, a low hum beneath the surface of their otherwise contented life. It had started subtly, an overheard snippet of a hushed phone call from Elena, a flicker of something unreadable in her dark eyes when he'd mentioned old university friends. He'd dismissed it as stress, the usual anxieties of raising a teenager on the cusp of adulthood. But the seed of doubt, once planted, had begun to sprout. He found himself replaying conversations, scrutinizing old photographs, searching for a narrative that made sense of this burgeoning feeling of disconnect. He looked at Anya, his spirited, bright-eyed girl of 15, so full of life and possessing that same gentle kindness he saw in his own reflection, but a reflection he suddenly felt was incomplete. Was it just a father's overactive imagination, or was there a truth buried beneath the layers of their comfortable, predictable life? He picked up a framed photo from the counter. Anya, as a toddler, her tiny hand gripping his finger, his own face creased with a love so profound it ached. He had poured his life, his energy, his very soul into providing for Elena and Anya, building this stable existence brick by painstaking brick after immigrating from Eastern Europe. Every scraped knuckle, every late night at the construction site, every dollar saved was for them. The thought that any part of it was built on a lie was a chilling prospect, a cold wind blowing through the once warm spaces of his heart. He longed for the simple truth, for genuine connection, for the assurance that the foundation of his family was as solid as the concrete he laid. The sterile environment of Sofia Ramirez's law office was a stark contrast to David's familiar world. The air, conditioned and quiet, seemed to amplify the gravity of the words being spoken. David sat opposite Sofia, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white, the worn edges of the meticulously organized files spread between them, a testament to the meticulous, painful journey that had brought him here. Sofia, a sharp legal advocate in her late 30s, with dark hair pulled into a neat bun and intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses, spoke with calm precision. She presented documents, financial records, and timelines that painted a picture David had fought desperately to ignore. The figures were undeniable: years of child support payments, financial planning centered on Anya's future education, life insurance policies listing Elena and Anya as beneficiaries. It was the blueprint of a father's unwavering commitment, a life built on the assumption of biological paternity. Sofia gently laid out the next steps. A paternity test, meticulously documented and legally sound, was the only way to confirm his fears or lay them to rest. She explained the legal ramifications, the potential for seeking restitution for years of misrepresented financial obligations, but her primary focus remained on David's emotional well-being and Anya's future security. David's gaze drifted to a small framed picture on Sofia's desk, a family photo, perhaps, her own. It was a quiet reminder of the human element behind the legal complexities, the real lives affected by truth and deception. He imagined Elena's reaction, the carefully constructed facade she had maintained for 2 decades. Fear, sharp and cold, pricked at him, not just for himself, but for Anya. How could this revelation shatter her world, the happy, stable existence he had always strived to provide? He felt a profound sense of betrayal, not just by Elena, but the years of his own life he had invested in a falsehood. The simple tradesman from Eastern Europe, who believed he had found his true home and family in Dallas, now stood at the precipice of a devastating truth. The family dinner table, once the epicenter of warmth and shared stories, now felt like a minefield. Anya, his bright, energetic 15-year-old daughter, was recounting a particularly amusing incident from school, her dark hair, so like her mother's, falling across her face as she laughed. David watched her, a lump forming in his throat. He saw the familiar curve of her smile, the light in her eyes that held a startling, unsettling resemblance to Elena's, yet also, he'd always believed, his own gentle gaze. Each giggle, each animated gesture was a poignant reminder of the years he had spent cherishing her, providing for her, believing her to be his own flesh and blood. Elena sat across from him, her dark almond-shaped eyes darting between David and Anya, a carefully composed mask of maternal serenity. Her slender figure was dressed in smart casual attire, a subtle silver necklace glinting at her throat, a picture of the devoted wife and mother she had always presented. Yet David could now see the tension in her jaw, the slight stiffness in her posture that spoke of a woman holding her breath. The air was thick with unspoken words, with the weight of a secret that threatened to crush them all. Anya, completely oblivious to the seismic shift occurring in her father's heart, continued her story, her youthful innocence a poignant counterpoint to the grim reality David was grappling with. He wanted to reach out, to assure her, to shield her from the storm that was brewing, but how could he? How could he reconcile the man who loved her unconditionally with the man who had been deceived for so long? The fabricated foundation of their lives, the perfect facade, was crumbling, and he was caught in the wreckage, unsure of how to rebuild, or if rebuilding was even possible without exposing Anya to the devastating truth.
David Petrov, a man whose hands had built more than just furniture. They had built a life, a family, a future rooted in Dallas soil. For 15 years his world revolved around Anya, his daughter, a bright spark with Elena's eyes, or so he'd always believed. He remembered Elena, her dark, alluring gaze, her carefully crafted smiles that promised a life he worked tirelessly to provide. He was a tradesman, his shoulders broad, his frame solid from years of honest labor, his receding light brown hair a testament to time and worry, but his blue eyes always held a deep, unwavering affection for his family. He wore his life like his clothes, practical, unassuming, comfortable. Jeans, a worn polo shirt, the scent of sawdust clinging faintly to his skin. He believed in truth, in the unbreakable bond of family, and above all, he believed he was Anya's father. The whispers started subtly, a misplaced letter, a hushed phone call Elena quickly ended, a flicker of something unreadable in her dark eyes when David asked about her past. These were not accusations, they were mere fragments, igniting a tiny, persistent ember of doubt. Could the foundation he'd so carefully built be resting on a lie? The thought was an intruder in his usually peaceful mind, a chilling anomaly in the predictable rhythm of his life. He started noticing things he'd previously overlooked. Anya's slight resemblance to someone from Elena's distant past, Elena's almost compulsive need for control over their finances, her evasiveness when asked about her history before meeting him. The ember of doubt began to glow, casting long, unsettling shadows on the edges of his perception. He felt a growing unease, a sense of standing on ground that was slowly giving way beneath his feet. He needed to know, not for revenge, but for his own peace, for the truth of his own identity as a father, and most importantly, for Anya's future, whatever it might hold. The sterile air of Sofia Ramirez's office did little to cool the burning questions in David Petrov's mind. He sat across from her, a man who had spent a lifetime building and creating, now feeling utterly dismantled. Sofia, sharp and composed in her impeccably tailored charcoal suit, listened intently, her dark, intelligent eyes visible behind stylish glasses, missing no nuance of his story. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat, professional bun, and her posture exuded an almost palpable competence. She was a force of order in the chaos that had consumed David's life. He recounted the years, the sacrifices, the gnawing suspicion that had finally driven him to seek legal counsel. He spoke of Elena, his wife, the woman who had built a life with him, a life now shrouded in a potential deceit he could barely comprehend. He laid out the financial records, the small inconsistencies, the growing unease that had become a constant companion. Sophia's gaze was steady, her voice a calm, measured counterpoint to his rising anxiety. "Mr. Petrov," she began, her tone professional yet empathetic, "what you're describing is a significant betrayal of trust, and it has legal implications. We'll need to gather evidence. Paternity tests are conclusive, and if the results confirm your suspicions, we can explore options for restitution, not just for the emotional toll, but for the years of financial obligation you've borne under false pretenses." She explained the process, the need for irrefutable proof, the legal avenues available to him. David felt a flicker of hope, a sense of agency returning to his life. Sophia was his guide, his anchor in this tempest of uncertainty. He watched her, this capable woman, systematically outlining a path forward, a plan to confront the lie that had defined his fatherhood. He knew this journey would be arduous, potentially devastating, but with Sophia by his side, he felt he could face whatever truth lay ahead, no matter how painful. The air in the Petrovs' usually warm, inviting living room had grown cold, thick with an unspoken tension that clung to the floral wallpaper and the framed family photographs. David stood before Elena, the paternity test results, a single damning document, clutched in his trembling hand. His face, usually etched with the gentle lines of a loving father, was now a mask of profound hurt and dawning fury. His kind blue eyes, once full of affection, now held a chilling clarity, seeing Elena not as his wife, but the architect of a monumental deceit. Elena Volkov-Petrov, her slender figure rigid, her long dark hair framing a face that had suddenly lost its warmth, met his gaze with a defiance born of desperation. Her striking, dark, almond-shaped eyes, usually so expressive, were now like chips of obsidian, hard and unyielding. She was dressed in a smart casual navy blue blouse and tailored slacks, a stark contrast to David's simple, practical attire, a subtle visual representation of their diverging realities. 15 years, Elena. David's voice was a raw whisper, each word a stone cast into the silence. 15 years, and this is the truth? He held up the paper, the stark black ink a stark betrayal against the white. Elena's carefully constructed composure began to fray. Her breathing grew shallow, her carefully maintained facade cracking under the weight of David's gaze and the undeniable evidence. She knew this day might come, had lived in the shadow of this fear for years, but the reality of it, the raw pain etched on David's face, was far more devastating than her imagined scenarios. She had sought stability with David, a life she could control, a future secure for Anya, but now her world was imploding. The life she had meticulously built, the secrets she had guarded so fiercely, were all about to crumble, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. Anya was upstairs, blissfully unaware, her bright, energetic teenage world about to be shattered by the very foundation of her existence being revealed as a lie.
David Petrov, a man whose hands were more accustomed to the feel of a wrench than a legal document, sat at his kitchen table, the late Dallas sun casting long shadows across the worn formica. The air, usually filled with the comfortable hum of domesticity, felt thick and heavy. Before him lay a document that had shattered his world, a DNA test report. For 47 years, David had lived a life built on trust, particularly with his wife, Elena, and his beloved daughter, Anya. He'd built a life as a skilled tradesman, an immigrant who'd poured his soul into creating a stable home in Texas, doting on Anya, celebrating every school play, every scraped knee, every graduation with fierce paternal pride. He believed in their story, in their love,
in the simple truth of their family. But this report, obtained through a discreet, last-ditch effort after a series of unsettling conversations and Elena's evasiveness, painted a starkly different picture. The numbers, stark and irrefutable, declared a 0% probability of paternity. The world spun. The familiar floral wallpaper of his kitchen seemed to warp, the scent of Elena's morning coffee now acrid. Years of shared meals, of bedtime stories, of financial sacrifices for Anya's future, the veterinary dreams he'd silently cheered, felt like a foundation built on sand. He traced the lines on his palm, hands that had built and fixed, now trembling with a tremor born not of physical exertion, but of profound emotional upheaval. Who was Anya's father? And why had Elena, the woman he loved, the architect of his domestic life, kept this monumental secret from him for so long? The questions gnawed at him, each one a fresh wound. The ensuing confrontation with Elena Volkov-Petrov was a storm David never anticipated. Her initial denial crumbled under the weight of the evidence, replaced by a cold, calculated pragmatism. She admitted the affair years before Anya's birth, a youthful indiscretion she had buried deep, fearing David's reaction and the potential collapse of the stable life she had meticulously cultivated. Her dark, almond-shaped eyes, usually capable of warmth, now held a steely resolve as she spoke of protecting Anya, of maintaining the status quo, her voice devoid of the remorse David desperately sought. It was clear Elena's primary concern was damage control, not genuine contrition. Realizing he was navigating treacherous emotional and legal waters alone, David sought out Sofia Ramirez. Sofia, a sharp legal advocate in her late 30s, with intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses and dark hair pulled into a neat bun, exuded an aura of competence that David desperately needed. In her impeccably professional office, surrounded by stacks of legal documents, Sofia listened intently. She laid out the grim realities, legal avenues for paternity fraud, the potential for complex litigation, and the emotional toll it would exact. She explained the concept of legal and financial restitution, the possibility of recovering years of child support paid under false pretenses. David, a man who had only ever sought truth and a stable family, felt a new, unwelcome fire ignite within him, the fire of a fighter. He saw Sofia not just as an attorney, but as a beacon in the suffocating darkness of Elena's deception. He wanted justice, not just for himself, but to safeguard Anya from the fallout of her mother's secrets, ensuring her future wasn't built on lies. Meanwhile, Anya Petrov, the vibrant 15-year-old at the heart of this unfolding drama, navigated her world with the unburdened energy of youth. Her days were a whirlwind of school, friends, and the budding ambition to become a veterinarian. She shared a close, loving bond with David, his kind eyes mirroring his own, a connection forged through countless shared moments, bike rides in local Dallas parks, and late-night talks about her future. She saw her parents, David and Elena, as the pillars of their stable, loving family, the bedrock upon which her dreams were built. Anya's world was one of innocent trust, unaware of the seismic shifts occurring beneath its surface. She noticed her parents' strained conversations, the hushed tones, the averted gazes, but her adolescent mind, focused on upcoming exams and social events, couldn't comprehend the true source. She'd sometimes catch David looking at her with an intensity that felt unfamiliar, a look tinged with sadness she couldn't decipher. For Elena, Anya remained the shield, the justification for her long-held deception. Every innocent question from Anya about their family, every bright smile, served to reinforce Elena's resolve to protect her daughter's perceived reality, even as it gnawed at her conscience. Anya's complete ignorance was David's greatest pain and his most urgent motivation. He yearned to protect her from the devastating truth, yet knew that the foundation of her life was a lie that could no longer stand. The question loomed: how could he protect Anya from the truth that had already irrevocably altered his own existence? And what would happen when she inevitably learned the full extent of her mother's concealment? The mahogany doors of the Dallas family court swung shut with a heavy thud, sealing out the hum of the city and leaving David Petrov in a room where the air felt thin and sharp. He sat beside Sofia Ramirez, his hands, the hands of a man who spent 20 years building a life for a daughter who wasn't his, clenched in his lap. Across the aisle, Elena sat rigid, her polished mask finally showing cracks under the fluorescent courtroom lights. The judge's voice was a monotone rhythm as he read the verdict that would dismantle 2 decades of deception. Based on the irrefutable DNA evidence, the court ordered the nullification of David's legal paternity. The child support modification was granted, and the path for financial restitution for years of misrepresented obligations was formally opened. David didn't feel the rush of victory he expected. Instead, he felt a hollow, aching stillness. As they exited the courthouse, the Dallas sun was blinding. He saw Anya waiting by the car, her smile, that disarming, innocent smile, brightening as she saw him. Elena had called the life she built a stable reality, but David now knew it was a cage built of secrets. He looked at the legal documents in his hand, the proof that he owed this girl nothing, and then he looked at Anya, the girl who still believed he was her hero. The law had settled the debt, but only David could settle the fatherhood. He walked towards her, not as the man who had been deceived, but as the only father she had ever known, ready to rebuild a life on the only thing left, a truth they would eventually have to face together.